Hey everyone, Nick here and welcome back to GamerTube, and welcome back to our What Could Be in Poppy Playtime series. So for today's character, we'll be looking into Boogie Bot. So we'll go through Boogie Bot's gameplay mechanics, their backstory, their location, and all that good stuff as well. And as always, I will just state that what I say in these videos isn't definitive of what the character will look like, act like, or what will actually be in the future chapters. These are pretty much just a cool what-if scenario, and we hope you enjoy the video. And lastly, before we start today's video, if you could please consider subscribing, as it helps out a lot and it's greatly appreciated. Also, it keeps you up to date with all the videos that we post. Alrighty, well let's take a look at Boogie Bot. So in our last video, we went into the character of Catbee. Our protagonist managed to unlock the doors to the next area, the theatre. Inside the theatre, they found a bunch of old movie posters and memorabilia. Alongside all these items, they also found a life-size mascot of Catbee. But this mascot has been broken open and it looks like something has crawled out of it. Eventually, after solving the puzzles of the theatre, they come face to face with the terrifying monster Catbee. The protagonist would have to fend off the frightening character and eventually beat Catbee. After defeating Catbee, they then progress to the next area of the factory. Now continuing where we left off, our protagonist makes their way through the exit of the movie theatre. They come to a door that leads back into the main lobby. But right next to the door is a large vent. The player decides to crawl through this vent and see where it takes them. As they make their way through the vent, they can hear strange noises all around them. There doesn't seem to be anyone behind them or in front of them. They continue to crawl until all of a sudden, Huggy breaks through one of the adjacent vent panels. As Huggy goes to grab the player, the weight of the two characters causes the vent to collapse. Both Huggy and the player fall from the ceiling vent and crash into the ground. The player quickly gets up and finds somewhere to hide. It seems that Huggy wasn't dead after all. But they definitely looked much more worse for wear after their fall. The protagonist continues to hide as Huggy walks off and searches for the player. Our protagonist looks around and sees discarded toy parts scattered throughout this area. They can also see a number of robotic arms and assembly lines. They then realise exactly where they were. It turns out they've landed inside the testing area of the facility. In our previous videos, we've guessed which character is linked with which area. We of course came to the conclusion that Boogie Bot was linked with the testing area. So now not only does the player need to avoid Huggy, but they also need to keep an eye out for Boogie Bot as well. Whilst exploring this new area, the player would come to realise that the front doors of the testing area were on the other side of the facility. Unfortunately, they've landed right at the very back and need to make their way back to the doors unscathed. So, whilst making their way through this area, they need to keep an eye out for Huggy. Huggy will be roaming around the area and can pop up at any given time. Once spotted, the player would need to run and hide. Just the simple act of hiding would rarely allow the player to lose Huggy. In this new area, the player would have to come to a point where they would need to hop on a conveyor belt with multiple robotic arms on either end. These arms were in charge of sorting out defective toys. If anything on the conveyor belt wasn't the correct size, the arms would grab them and toss them into a disposal shredder. As the conveyor belt started to move, they noticed each of the robotic arms had a blue or red GrabPack switch. As the arms approach the player, they would need to disable each arm by pressing the correct switch. The arms would approach faster and faster, and the player would need to keep up with the rhythm. If they failed, the arm would grab them and they'd meet their tragic end. Once they passed all the arms, they noticed there was a strange figure at the end of the conveyor belt. As they got closer, it was revealed to be a life-sized version of Boogie Bot. There was nothing the player could do. Any second now, they would run straight into this strange robot. It didn't seem to be active, but who knows what it could do. As they got closer, Boogie Bot's eyes lit up and their chest compartment opened up as well. The conveyor belt launches the player directly into Boogie Bot's open compartment. They hear it slam shut and can only see darkness. Then all of a sudden they can see an old black and white screen appear. It seems they are looking through the eyes of Boogie Bot. Then suddenly they see Huggy approach the screen. They stare at it for a while and then move on. When the coast is clear, the player gets ejected out of Boogie Bot. As they stare at the rusty old robot, it becomes clear they were trying to help the player. With Huggy roaming around the testing facility, they had no choice but to trust Boogie Bot. Maybe they could use them to get to the exit safely. So in this gameplay segment, the player would need to use Boogie Bot to hide whenever Huggy gets close. Boogie Bot would follow behind the player and open up whenever the player needs to hide. But this did come with a drawback. Considering this little compartment inside Boogie Bot was awfully cramped, it was also airtight as well. So the player would only be able to hide for a short amount of time. If they stayed inside too long, they would eventually run out of air. The player would also need to use Boogie Bot to get inside of whenever they went through any bioorganic scanners. These were used to detect workers or any living things to stop them from accessing certain parts of the testing facility. As Boogie Bot and the player make their way through solving puzzles and hiding from Huggy, they eventually make it towards the front doors. Just as they approach the front doors, they're suddenly ambushed by Huggy. The player quickly leaps inside Boogie Bot to protect themselves. Huggy decides to attack Boogie Bot to try and get the hiding player. Huggy manages to strike Boogie Bot straight in the monitor, cracking their screen. This blow to the face managed to short-circuit Boogie Bot. Whilst inside viewing the monitor, 3 switches drop down. In order to fend off Huggy, Boogie Bot has given full control over to the player. There's a left and right hand switch to control both of their arms, and a red switch in the middle to open up the hatch for a moment to get some air. So the player would have to fight back with each arm and open up when it was safe to get air. The player needs to push Huggy towards a set of robotic arms to finally defeat them once and for all. Huggy would be able to strike back, and every blow that they deliver, Boogie Bot's body would get weaker and weaker, and eventually it would fall apart, revealing the player inside. Finally, with one last push, they manage to push Huggy into the robotic arms as they both grab onto him. They both pull apart as one of them rips off his material arm. The arms toss Huggy and their ripped off arm into the shredder. After they heard a loud shredding sound, finally the battle was over. As the player hops out of Boogie Bot, they finally reboot. Boogie Bot opens up the door and the player walks back into the main lobby. Boogie Bot says goodbye as they close the doors and continue their work inside the testing facility. Now the player stands back in the lobby and they need to move on and find the next unexplored area of the Playtime Factory. Alrighty everyone, well that's all we had for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider leaving a like, commenting and subscribing, as it helps out a lot and it's greatly appreciated. Also, do be sure to comment down below what you thought of today's character, and also what you'd like to see going forward. Alrighty, well, until the next video, I'll catch you later, bye.